Hey everyone. So, welcome back. We're on day 3 of the Mkoba briefcase or the Mkoba bag. On day 1, we did the prep work. On day 2, we did the exterior of the bag. The exciting part about it is that now we're on day 3, and on day 3, we're going to do the lining, the zipper closure, as well as putting it all together, adding our handle onto the top, and then we will be done. Thank you and welcome back to everyone for coming in. Tonight, we're going to go through a couple of pieces. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Maldonado, and I'm the owner and curator of Sew Your Bag, a subscription box service for beginner and aspiring bag makers. You will get a box that has everything in it. So throughout the video, you will hear me mention if you receive the kit, this was in the kit, and that's because we have a subscription box. I also sell other things for bag makers such as interface and hardware. I will mention that, and anything that I mention, I will put in the show notes below right after this video. So thank you again for joining me. And we're going to get started. And the first thing we're going to do is review the pieces that we will need for day 3. I am going to mention that there will be camera switching. So if that makes anybody dizzy, I apologize. But I like to switch to make sure that you all see exactly what I'm doing. You will see me go between the cutting mat primarily and the sewing machine, and I will give you directions exactly on what I'm doing at the sewing machine so that you know that as well. The first thing that we're going to need is we will need our lining piece. This will be the inside of our bag. And this was our finished exterior that we had. So we actually need to put the inside in there. And so this will be the lining piece. The lining piece, just so that you're aware, is one piece. It's not 2 pieces. The other thing we will need is our top border pieces. So these pieces will be added to the top of each of our lining pieces. We will need 2 of those. We will need the zipper closure. And this is a recessed zipper, which means that it sits inside the bag. Once the bag is complete, it actually, and this is a finished bag here. So this is the inside. The top border piece is what I have. This is the recessed zipper piece. So what's going to happen is it will sit down in the bag and I attach it to the lining. We have our lining, which I also mentioned. And then we will need a pocket. We're only doing a simple pocket on the inside, and I actually cut it out of the lining piece as well. You can do it a contrasting if you would like. This is the sides for our bags. Our bags on the side, we're going to attach that. And we did review that yesterday when we constructed the exterior. So just to show you what the side looks like, this is the side on the exterior. And we'll have to do the same for the lining. So we need the sides for the lining. You're also going to need your zipper, and I use zipper by the yard. I cut it sometimes a little bit longer than what I need, and then I adjust it. But it has unfinished ends on both edges, so you can see those are raw. And we're going to finish off one end by, I'm going to show you how to create this zipper end. And this is a zipper end that you'll see if you don't actually have a metal zipper end. And it's something you can do out of your fabric. And then on this side, we're going to finish that as well. And when we come to that, I'll show you. So this is the zipper. You will need a piece of decovil heavy. And decovil heavy, we're going to use to reinforce the bottom of our bag. But because we used waterproof canvas on the bottom, we could not affix this to the actual bottom of the exterior. So we're going to put it on the bottom of our lining. So it doesn't matter where you put it as long as you get it in there. So we're going to put this on the bottom of the lining to make it a little bit stiffer. For anybody who's following along in the pattern, we left off after we put in the sides. So we're now up to page 26. Sometimes people tell me, you say you're halfway there, but it just feels like I'm not really halfway there. But we're halfway there. This is a simple one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by constructing or adding the zipper end. You should have an iron. I have some paper tape here. I will also be using some double-sided tape. So will need some double-sided tape. I have a rotary cutter, marking tools, some type of removable pen. I will probably be using this and my chalk liner only because the fabric is black. So you may see me interchangeably do that as well. And iron, sewing machine, standard things. So we're going to get our zipper. And we're going to get our zipper end here. When I construct the zipper end, when it's done, it's going to fit on here and it'll be snug. So I'm going to do it maybe a little bit different than you've seen it done before, because I like to balance the material so that it's even on both sides. So I don't like when there's bulk on the back or bulk on the front. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure. I'm looking at the longer edges over here, and I'm going to measure in from the edges a half an inch. So I'm just going to double check my directions. Okay. So it's going to be the shorter edge. I'm going to measure in a half an inch. And I've been saying throughout, when you have to do a fold, double what you need your fold to be, draw a line, and then what you're going to do is come back and actually fold to that line. I'm going to measure in a half an inch from my short edges. And I want my fold to be 1/4 of an inch. So that's why I'm measuring in a half an inch. So 1/4 times 2 is 1/2. So you can see I drew that line. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over. So I'm going to fold this short raw edge to that line. So I'm going to fold this way to the line. You can finger press it or you can iron it in the direction I tell you to iron it. So you would iron that flat, and you would do the same thing on this side as well, on the opposite side as well. So what you want to do is get a nice crisp edge to your piece. That's really what you're doing. So let's grab our iron and our ironing board and do that. It just makes it easier when we're done. When you fold it, when you turn it right side out, it just makes it easier to get that crisp edge as opposed to trying to do it afterwards, and then it doesn't always look as nice as you'd like it to look. So by ironing it, what you're doing is making sure that you're starting out where you want to end up. The other thing is on this, I used my own interface DHL 2010, and it's the heavy, so that also is very crisp. Once I've done that, I'm then going to fold this right sides together. So I'm folding the folded edge. Let's get a little bit closer. All right, well, hopefully it'll come back. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fold those two edges together. And then I will clip it. So I'm just going to clip it on the side. You want to make sure also your ends are aligned as well. So the next thing we're going to do is go to our sewing machine. And I'm going to sew along this edge at 1/4 of an inch. I use a stitch length of between a 3 and a 3.5, so whichever one you're comfortable with. For me, the 1/4 of an inch on my sewing machine is going to be along the edge of my presser foot. You should measure it for yourself and know where it is, but that's my 1/4 of an inch. I will back tack at the beginning and the end as well. So that's one side. And I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. So I'm just going to flip this over and do the same on the opposite side. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we will turn this right side out. So this is my zipper. I'm looking at the part of it where this is flat over here. And when that's flat, that's where I'm going to attach it. You don't want to attach it on this end where the zipper closes. You want to, if your zipper is opening towards the bottom in this case, that's going to be the bottom. We're going to insert our zipper end there. Before I do that, I want to trim this a little bit just so it's not so bulky. and also to make sure that, it lies nice and flat. So I'm going to cut off, it's a 1/4 of an inch. I cut off about 1/8 of an inch, so in half. The next thing I will do is I will turn this right side out. It will be a little fiddly, but you can get it done. And then once you get it right side out, just poke out those corners. I stitch the folded edge once I put it on. That's how I secure it to the actual zipper. So get a little pokey tool thing, a crochet hook, whatever you need. This is just a hair clip that I keep in here. All right. So when you're done, it's going to look like that. It's all done, nice and done. Now we have that piece. So now what we're going to do is we're going to slide this over our zipper. You can come back and iron it. So if you want to come back in, you can iron it. I'm not going to do that. But what you will notice if you look in there, what you'll notice is there's an even amount of fabric on the back as on the front. And that's really what I like that. I don't like when they fold it and there's all this fabric on the back. It's another way of doing a zipper tab, but there's all this fabric on either the front or the back when they create the pocket. All right, once again, we're going to grab our zipper. Here goes our zipper. We're going to slide it right into that pocket. It's okay if it's a little bit small. Just fold up that zipper and stick it right in there. Push it in as far as it will go. What I will say to you is make sure that seam, there's a seam right here on this, stick this so that the seam is to the back because you want it to be a nice clean finish on the front. So I'm just going to stick that right in there and I push it until it stops. I'm going to add a clip to my sides here to hold it in place. I will then go to the sewing machine and I'm going to, in sewing things, I try to sew in such a way that I start where I think it's going to be the least obvious. So if you think you're not going to be able to match the stitches at the top, then don't start at the top. I'm going to start on the side and I'm going to start somewhere in the middle on the side and I'm going to come up, pivot when I get to the corners, go across the top, go back down, across the bottom, and then come back up and try to match those stitches and I back tack. If you think it's easier to do it from the bottom, then do that. What I do say is do not start in a corner because it's harder to match up the corners and it becomes more obvious if it's not matched. So what we're going to do now is go to the sewing machine. This will be a top stitch. So because it's a top stitch, I'm going to use a stitch length of between a 4 and a 4.5. This is also a nylon zipper. Be careful, even though it's, people say, oh, it's a metal zipper, then be careful. Be careful whether it's a nylon or a metal zipper. So you'll see me slow down as I go across that because I really don't want to break a needle. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to start on one of these sides. I will be stitching at 1/8 of an inch. If you're more comfortable stitching at a 1/4 of an inch, you can do that for the zipper. I know some beginners, because it's near the edge, they're afraid that it'll go off. Take your time. I'm changing my stitch length and just take your time doing this. I'm going to back tack at the beginning and the end. When you get to the end, you should be about 1/8 of an inch away. If you're not 1/8 of an inch and you need to get a little bit closer, there's a couple of things you can do. You can take one stitch so you can hand crank it. If you believe it's going to be too far away, you can turn your stitch length down, take a stitch till you get to where you need to be, and then turn it back up to between 4 and 4.5. So that's, I took almost like a half of a stitch. You want to make sure that the needle is going up. So if you look at my needle here, as I rotate my hand wheel, make sure it's going up. By doing that, you make sure also that you get a clean turn. So once it's going up, leave the needle down, lift your presser foot, rotate your zipper, lower your presser foot, and then stitch across the top. When you get to about 1/8 of an inch again, rotate your needle so it's going up. That makes sure that you caught your bobbin thread. Lift your presser foot. The needle should still be in there. Rotate it. Drop your presser foot and then stitch to the bottom. All right. And I'll show you something when I get back to the sewing machine, which is why I tell you make sure that that needle is going up. Because it happened on this when the needle came out. Okay, so let's go back to our cutting mat. When I did my corner over here and my needle came out, I think I can show you on the front. And hopefully you can see it. Can you see right there, there's an angular stitch. It goes from here and it goes at an angle instead of going straight up and across. That's why I tell you to make sure that your needle is going up. This happens when the thread on the top does not catch your bobbin thread. So you will get that jog. So by always remembering to hand crank it so that your needle is going in the upward position, you know that it's caught the bobbin thread, and therefore you can then pivot. When I was doing this at the sewing machine, what happened was I actually overshot this. So when I pulled it out, I couldn't get it back where I needed to get it. But that will happen because you're not catching the bobbin thread. So that's just a little tip. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, because now we have that and it should be on the end. Remember the end, when you pull it down, that's open, pull it up, it's closing, right? So it should be on the end where the zipper is flat. The next thing we want to do is we want to address this end of the zipper because once again, it is unfinished. The pattern is geared towards zipper by the yard. So if you have a zipper that has the metal piece, you can cut off that metal piece and do the same steps I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold. So what I have you do is I have you come here and place a mark 1/2 inch down from that edge. I'm going to use my chalk liner and I'm just going to draw a line 1/2 inch from both ends. Once you've done that, you're going to, and I'll start with one side, you're going to open the zipper and then you're going to fold that chalk line. So I'm just folding it up and I'm pushing it towards the zipper teeth. So I'm pushing it up towards the zipper teeth. And I'll use a pin here because I want to show you, if I put a clip, it's going to cover it. So I'll put a pin so you can see it. So I take that. Some people say pinch it. Whatever it takes, you're going to do that and you're going to fold that, take that line and put it right underneath your zipper teeth. And I'm going to just add a pin here so I can show you exactly what that looks like. Now, normally I don't draw a line because I've done it so often, but that's what it should look like. And really what I do is I get my zipper tape flush with that raw edge. So when you turn it around, it's then totally flush. It's okay if it's not, like you try this and it doesn't work. You can do 1 inch and then fold it under just like that, the same way, and you get a little bit extra. That's totally fine. Just make sure your measurements are exactly the same because you don't want one coming lower down than the other, right? You want them to be even. So you can see one's lower than the other. So if 1/2 inch is hard for you, do it at 1 inch, do it at 3/4 inch, do whatever you need it to, to be successful. So I'm going to stick a pin here because I want to show you what they both look like when they're done. Now you can hand stitch this, but I don't like hand stitching. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine, but that's what they'll look like when they're done, just like that. All right. So we're going to go to the sewing machine now and we will stitch this in place. Now, the way that I sew this at the sewing machine is I want to stitch it about 1/8 of an inch because my seam allowance is going to be 1/4 of an inch. If your seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch, you could stitch it down at 1/4 of an inch. You just want to make sure that you're stitching it in such a way that you don't have to rip out stitches really. I hate unpicking things. So you want to make sure you don't have to unpick it. So the first thing I do is lower my needle into, and try to avoid the pin, into my zipper. So I lower the needle into the zipper. Then I lower my presser foot. Then you can remove your pin just like that, because it's now being held totally in place. What I do is I sew going forward first, because if you sew going backward, you'll misalign all the alignment, or the straight part that you tried to get. So I take a couple of stitches going forward, and I do use between a 3 and a 3.5. I go forward first, and then I go backwards, because it's being held so my alignment won't come out of place. I will show you that. So can you see that? I'll go back to the cutting mat and show you that, but you see how it stays totally at a right angle? So I'll do it again on this side. So what I do is I place my piece under there. The first thing I do, and watch your fingers, is I lower my needle so that I get all the layers. I then lower my presser foot to make sure it's holding, and I remove my pin. I stitch going forward first and then back. So I take a couple of stitches forward, and then I take stitches back. I go all the way back. I actually go over the zipper end, and then I come back. Let's see what that looks like at the cutting mat. I'm just going to trim some of these threads real quick. This is what it's going to look like when you're done. If you close your zipper, they should be more or less even. See that? And that's really what you're trying to do. So you want to get that 90-degree turn. When I stick the needle down, I'm actually getting through this top layer, and then there's 2 more layers here. But that's how I get it to hold, is by putting the needle down first, lowering my presser foot, then removing the pin. Everything's locked. If I go straight, I'm then locking all of these layers down, and when I go back, I don't have to worry. If you go back, because there is nothing holding it, this will start to turn out and it won't be straight. So I hope that explanation helps somebody. But that's what I do, and that's how I get the zipper. Okay, so the next step, after we've done that, our zipper is now complete because we've put on the ends and we've done the fold. So for anybody following along with me in the pattern, I'm now on page 30. And I'm going to set this aside. So what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about the zipper closure. What I have you do is you're going to cut 2 pieces for your zipper closure, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so this is zipper closure. I want the top to look like the exterior, so it looks nice and finished, because this is going to be the exterior. Also, when you look in your bag and you see that piece, it looks also very nice. And then the underneath side will be the lining. So that's why I had you cut 2 pieces. I have you cut it as one continuous piece, easier to interface. And now we're going to cut it in half. All right, so I have 2 pieces here. All right, I'm not going to worry about the lining for right now. Let's talk about the top. So I'm going to cut it in half. What I like to do is, because it's one piece, I'm going to rotate it, cut it in half, and then we'll talk about another tip or another technique that I use. Everybody's different. This is just my way of doing it. And I'll show you on the original bag, because it'll make a lot of sense. It'll make more sense if I show you on the original bag. So when I cut it in half, what happens is, this is a continuous pattern, right? When I put it together, you can see the pattern is continuous, because I cut it right down the middle, lengthwise I cut it. And the reason I do that is because when I put the zipper in the middle, I want it to look like a continuous pattern. And I'm just going to show you what I mean. I don't know if you can see this, but hopefully you can. Can you see how like that swirl looks continuous and the only break is actually the zipper that's in the middle? It's the same thing here. The only break is the zipper in the middle. So it gives it a more cohesive look. If you do it, if you just cut them separately, like two pieces of material and cut them separately, what could happen is that like it could look like this. You see how it doesn't always, it doesn't really kind of make sense. It does in this case because the swirls are in there. But if you use another piece of fabric, it may not look as cohesive. This actually came together pretty nicely. So that's probably more obvious, right? So it's probably more obvious that way. So what I do is I have you cut a full piece and then I have you cut it in half. You're going to flip over one piece. So I'm going to flip it over to the right, my right piece. And I'm going to draw an arrow because that's going to be my center. I drew an arrow. I'm going to flip it back, just double check one piece. Then I'm going to flip this back and I'm going to draw another arrow. So now that lets me know, those arrows let me know when I attach my zipper, which piece should be touching the zipper. And I know then that my print, when I'm done, will look cohesive and nice and pretty. So that's just something that I do when I install a zipper. I thought I would pass that along to you. When it comes to the lining piece, you can do the same thing. Although honestly, it may not matter. It doesn't matter as much. Sometimes if you use waterproof canvas or something, it doesn't matter as much. But you can do the same thing. So if you want that to be cohesive, you cut it down the middle, flip one, mark the center, flip it back, flip the other one, and mark the center. So I'm just drawing an arrow so I know when I put it in which way it should go. All right. So now that we've cut those pieces, we're going to draw a line and we're going to draw it on the short end of our pieces. And that's because we're going to do our 1/4 inch fold over. So let's see. Just trying to figure out which one I like better. Do I like that end or do I like this end? So we're going to do a 1/4 inch fold over on all of the pieces. So I'm just going to turn this over. I'm going to draw a 1/2 inch line because remember I said you double the width that you want to do. I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. All right. And I'm just going to double check myself because I do zippers different ways depending on what I'm trying to teach. And this is going to be the bottom. So this is going to be the bottom of our, and we'll talk about the top in a minute. Okay, so now I turn those back over. So now I'm going to do the same thing with my lining. So I can see. Draw a 1/2 inch. And then we're going to iron this. And that's because when I get to the bottom and I'm finishing, I want it to be very, very clean. So that's why I'm doing the fold now. And I'm going to iron it, those fold overs, so that it's a very clean finish at the bottom. And just follow along and you'll see as everything comes together. I'm going to grab my pieces. Be very careful because I used a heat erasable pen. You're going to fold this short end to that line. So you're going to fold it down to meet that line. Watch your fingers if you're using steam. And we're going to do that on all our pieces. That's one. Let me just set that to the side. I'm going to do the same on all the pieces. Now, if you don't get it exactly right, that's okay because when we're done, we can always just, tweak it a little bit, to make sure everything lines up. But you want to get it, as close as you can at the bottom. And we just have one more. Now, what I do is I take one of my lining pieces and one of my exterior pieces. So I take one of each of these. I'm going to put them right side together, just like that. And I think I ironed the wrong end. So just let me double check. It doesn't matter as much on this side as it does on the other side. Yep. Okay, great. So now I'm going to take this piece. I want the folded edges to match. So you're going to match those folded edges at the bottom, just like that. This is going to be my center, and it should match the center of the other one when I'm done. I'm going to clip in place the top that I didn't sew. So these match at the bottom, but let's clip this in place at the top. I'm going to sew this along the top using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So the reason that I do that is once I sew that, I'm going to open it up and then I'm going to place my zipper in there. So I'm going to sew along that edge at 1/4 of an inch using a stitch length of between 3 and 3.5. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. So while I'm at the sewing machine, I'll do the same thing. Make sure you align the bottoms with the fold. We're not ironing the folded edge. We're ironing the edge that we have, that's the raw edge, the short raw edges at the top. I mean sewing. We're not sewing, we're sewing that piece. Okay, so we're sewing the unfinished edges at the top, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance across. So let's go to the sewing machine. Change your stitch length down to a 3 or 3.5. Make sure you've done that. I am going to back tack at the beginning and the end. So I will be back tacking. And I won't take this out. I'll just snuggle up this other one as well. So I'm going to go off here and I'm just going to push that right underneath my presser foot and I'm going to continue, make sure that I back tack. Okay, so I'm just going to do the same here. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to take a look. So now we have these two pieces. They should match like this because here goes my arrows. I don't see if you can see my arrows in the middle. I'm going to grab so this is my arrows, which means that's really where my center is, and that's where I should be placing my zipper. I'm going to place my zipper because I want this to be on the top. So in other words, my zipper should end up looking like this, right side up there, just like that. Okay. I need to place my zipper so that that happens correctly. So what I normally do is I open this up as well, hold it like that. Look at my zipper, right? That's my arrow. And then what I will do is I will flip my zipper wrong side down in here. I'm going to pull the zipper pull out of the way because I don't need all of that. And I'm going to snug that curve right into where this is sewn. And I'm going to align it all the way down. My bottom should remain folded and I'm snugging it right in there. To help me out, I'm going to use a piece of double-sided tape. Like I said, that will help. You can clip it if you'd want or pin it. Just be careful if you're pinning the way that you pin it, because when you pin something, it actually pulls the fabric up and it doesn't necessarily lay as flat as you'd like it. I'm using 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape. You can use 1/4 of an inch, but if you use 1/4 of an inch, make sure to use like a deeper stitch, like a 3/8 of an inch instead of 1/4 of an inch. This will help to hold it down, so I don't need to use any kind of clips or pins. It's going to lay down just like that. If we look at the end over here, I did not bring my tape all the way to the end. I stopped about maybe a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to peel the backing off, just like that. Once again, I'm going to take this curve and I'm actually going to snug it right in there. And I'm going to make sure that I align the edge of my zipper with the raw edge of my fabric on the long end. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to come all the way down. Okay, so then it's going to look like that. I'm going to smooth it out. I have a little bit of a bubble here, so I'm going to pull it and smooth it out so that it sits just like that. Now, the reason I use 1/8 of an inch is because it keeps my tape out of my stitch line. And when I sew, I don't have to worry about, gumming up my needle. I also use, this is a scrapbooking tape, so it's very low tack. I don't use anything very sticky. I've had no issues with it gumming up my needle. By the time it gums up my needle, it's time to change the needle. I'm now going to put another piece right on top of my zipper. Once again, stop about a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. Just like that. I'm going to peel the backing off. And then I'm making what's known as a zipper sandwich. I'm going to fold my lining piece over my zipper. It's known as a zipper sandwich. And then you just align everything, including the bottom. So just like that. All right, so make sure it's smooth. I'm not using any pins. If you're using pins, make sure to take them out as you go. So I'm just playing around a little bit with this. What I will do is I will unfold my bottom piece there. I'm going to mark where the crease is. I'm going to come back in later and I'm going to refold it. But that's where my crease is. I may have to readjust it. So in other words, when I fold it, it may not be a clean fold. So I want to make sure after I've sewn it, right, I make sure that it's even before I put it together. So sew it with it laying flat. Stop where that crease is because that's really where we're going to fold it again, and back tack. All right. You're going to sew along this edge, and I do start right over here at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Double check that everything in here is correct. So let's go back to the sewing machine. My stitch length, just as you know, is still between a 3 and a 3.5. Take your time because that zipper at the top here is a little bit thick. And once again, there are zipper teeth in there. I'm going to back tack. Okay. When I get to this mark down here, remember I said you're going to stop and back tack at that mark because that is your fold line. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. All right. So now that I've done that, it should look like this. I'm going to cut at a 45-degree angle. So hopefully you can see my stitches right there. I'm going to cut this at a 45-degree angle. So it's from one stitch line to the other. And that's just to help reduce the bulk. Just like that. I'm then going to cut off here 1/8 of an inch. So about in half. Once again, that's just to help reduce the bulk. So this should give me a nice clean corner that reduces the bulk. I'm then going to take my pieces and I'm going to turn them right side out. Just like that. I'm going to slightly tug on my zipper. You don't want to dislodge it, but you want to tug on it a little bit just to get it out. Just like that. You can use a little pokey tool if you would like. I'm pulling, I'm holding it like this and pulling. Once again, you should have stopped about 1/8 of an inch where that fold is. So if you fold your fabric back in on itself, you should be able to fold it back up. So if I fold it this way, I should be able to fold it up that way, and likewise on the other side as well. And then you can align. So you may have to do a little bit of adjustment. If your fold is a little bit off, you know, if one's longer than the other, just do a little bit of adjustment, but you want to make sure that they align right there. I'm going to put a clip to hold it. And then I'm just going to flatten this. I'm going to come back later and, you know, iron it, but I just want to flatten it. And what I want to do is line this long raw edge with the front and the back. So I'm pushing the fabric and pulling it on the back, and then I'm going to clip that in place. And I would have done 1/2 of my zipper. So you want to get this perpendicular at a right angle, 90-degree angle, and as close as you can. Make sure you align these raw edges here. You can definitely do 3/8 of an inch if you want to. I always use 1/4 of an inch because I like to see my zipper, but that's what it'll look like when you're done. Okay. So that's 1/2 of your zipper complete. So we're going to do the same thing with the other half of our zipper, right? So I'm going to open this up. I want this to be on the top. Remember I said we folded it over like this. And what we're really doing is we're sticking our zipper on the inside. You don't want it like this when you sew it. You want it like this. So the zipper is wrong side down. I'm going to open this up. There's my arrow, right? I'm going to make sure my zipper is straight, and I'm going to align this raw edge with the raw edge of that. So the same way I did before, and I'm going to add a piece of double-sided tape. So I'm creating another zipper sandwich. I'm going to take my zipper. I'm going to bump it right up against that when I peel off the backing. So you peel the backing off your double-sided tape. It should be shiny. I don't know if you can see that it's shiny, so I know it's off. If you ever have trouble, use like a tip of a pointy scissor, or I use my awl to just scratch a little bit at the edge, because sometimes it can be hard to peel the backing off. And I am pushing down, so I'm pushing down firmly so it holds it in place. I'm going to add another piece to the back here. Once again, I actually folded my piece under temporarily because remember, you don't want to go all the way to the end. I just want to get it till that like fold line or an 1/8 of an inch away, because I don't want to see it on the front when I finish my zipper, and I hate peeling stuff away and being fussy about things. So peel that backing off, create our zipper sandwich by folding our lining piece down over it, just like that, and press in place. All right. We're going to go back to our sewing machine. Make sure that you unfold this piece here, because remember, we're going to come back later on. All right. If you're afraid that you're not going to be able to see that, I'm just going to put a little mark there so it's very clear to me where the fold is. And I put it on both sides because sometimes I get to the sewing machine and I don't sew from the side. I may decide, oh, I'm going to sew it this way, and then I get to the sewing machine. I go, no, I'm going to sew it that way. So I just mark both sides, which make it easier for me. Okay. 1/4 of an inch down the long raw edge. Stitch length remains the same at between a 3 and a 3.5. Okay. Make sure that this is unfolded at the bottom. Back tack. All right. So let's take a look and see what we've done. Once again, I'm going to trim to reduce the bulk. Cut off about 1/8 at the top here. Well, before I do that, I'm going to take a 45-degree angle cut right here. Then I'm going to trim this. So I take off about half. I'm going to turn it right side out. So I'm just pushing, 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 just like that. You can slightly tug on your zipper. Don't go yanking it, but you can slightly tug on it. Like I said, I am going to come back and iron this because it is a little bit stiff. Align your top edges here, your long edges. And I clip them in place. And I pull them a little bit as well, so. I'm going to just zip this guy up real quick. You'll see how the pattern is. This is definitely something that, you know, if you don't get it the first time and your pattern is not, you know, continuous, don't stress about it. Don't stress about it, really. I've done this where I take so many precautions to make sure it's continuous and then it comes out backwards. So, I mean, I don't worry about it. All right, I'm going to fold these ends in. So they should not have been sewn. So I should be able to fold them in, and then I'm going to align them on the bottom. So just make sure you align it at the bottom. And if you have to, like I said, if you have to fiddle with the fold because it's not aligning, that's okay. It just makes it easier than trying to get it to fold when you're done. And I'm going to come back. And I'm going to iron on the inside. If you're using a metal zipper, that can get hard. That could get hot. I mean, I shouldn't say hard. It could get hot. Be very, very careful. I just want it to be nice and crisp. So I am going to iron. But what I'm going to iron is I'm going to iron on the fabric right here. And I just want it to be totally, totally flat. But if you look at it, you can see now how and it's harder to see here because it took up some of the material. But there is like a cohesive swirl going on here. And it's uniform. So that's what I was, hopefully now that you see it, I was trying to explain what would happen. Okay. So now I'm just going to iron this very quickly. Like I said, I just want that to be flat for myself. And I'm ironing by the zipper. So I'm just going to open this up. And I'm ironing over here. If you clipped it at the top, it makes it that much easier. It's a nylon zipper. I'm angling my iron away from the zipper teeth. So I'm not ironing on the zipper teeth. I'm angling it away. And I'm going to do this one, which means what I'm doing is I'm pushing it away. You don't have to do this. I just, I just want it to be as crisp and sharp as possible. Okay. So now what we're going to do, now that we've done that, we need to top stitch our zipper. So what we're going to do is top stitch all the way around each half of the zipper. So not the entire zipper. So I'm going to top stitch this all the way around, and I'm going to top stitch that. The way that I do it is I want to make sure that these two pieces stay together. Remember, I said I based a lot of things, but I'm going to use the top stitching length of between 4 and 4.5. I'm going to start on the top where the raw edge is, and I'm going to go all the way down. When I get to this corner, I'm going to pivot, and we'll talk about, I'll remind you again to leave the needle down, all that good stuff, go across the bottom, and then go up the end. That's why we folded this, right? So now it looks like it's totally finished. When we've done one side, we're going to come back and do the other side. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Now you can start anywhere you'd like on the top. I'm doing 1/8 of an inch. Once again, if this is new to you and you're not comfortable doing an eighth of an inch, this is someplace you can do a quarter of an inch all the way around. I would recommend that you not do it, at the top. Try to stay within the eighth. It doesn't matter here if you go off on this side because it's going to go into a seam. But if you want to do this, all of these other folded edges with a quarter of an inch, please feel free to do so. So just getting into the habit, when you're an eighth of an inch away, rotate your needle so it's going up. You know that you caught your bobbin thread. You're then going to leave the needle down, lift your presser foot and pivot. Come all the way down to this edge. Needle down, rotate so the needle goes up, lift your presser foot, pivot, and then take your time along this edge. It is kind of thick in this corner, so take your time over there. Rotate needle going up. One last time. And then just match the ends. Okay, so that's one side done. I'm now going to do the same on the other side. Okay, let's go back to the cutting mat and see what we've done. Okay, so that's our zipper. I like to pivot to create that right angle. Some people will do it and they'll curve around. I have personally found when I try to curve around, both sides don't look the same. And also curving is something that comes with practice. So by doing this way, you know that you're always going to get it right. So I just do right angles everywhere. Okay. So next what we will do is we've completed our zipper. If you're following along, I am on page 30. Yep, I'm on page 34. I need to find the center of this because when we align it with our lining piece, so this is going to be our lining piece, we're not going to push it all the way to one side or the other. I want it right in the middle of my lining. So that means I have to find the center of this along with finding the center of my lining. So to do that, I'm not going to fold it zipper end like this. Rather, I'm going to fold these two pieces like that. All right. So I fold and give a snip. If you'd like, you can fold it and you can use a marking tool to mark the center. I'm just going to put a little snip in it. So I just fold it just like that. Once again, it's the fabric to the fabric. It's not the zipper end. And I'm going to snip just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. and I snip. My zipper is closed when I do this, right? Because I want to make sure it's totally as flat as possible. Okay, so I have 2 snips in here. Hopefully I can, yep. I have a snip here and I have a snip down there. So those are going to be my zipper. That's where, I'm sorry, that's where I'm going to put my zipper centered on my fabric. Okay. So next what you're going to do is you're going to get I'm going to set this aside and we're going to get our internal slip pocket. So we're getting all our pieces prepared to be able to put it together. So this is your internal slip pocket. We will lay it down so that it measures, it's wider rather than it is taller. We're going to turn it to the wrong side on our cutting mat. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to fold it in half this way. So when I do that, I want to make sure that I have finished edges along this edge. So I will measure in on both of those long edges first at a 1/2 inch, fold a 1/4 inch, so that when I fold it in half this way, these are nice and sharp. So you'll see what I mean. So let's fold it in, measure in a 1/2 inch. On both long edges. So it is longer than it is taller. I mean, you know, wider. And so we're going to measure in a 1/2 inch. Once again, because I measured in a 1/2 inch, my fold over will be a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to fold this so it matches that line and it should be a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to iron it in place. Now you don't necessarily have to do this. It just makes for a cleaner finish when you're done. You can, you know, do it all the way around and then, but I find that it comes a lot sharper when you do it this way. So I'm just going to come back and iron that 1/4 inch, which is my seam allowance. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. And I'm going to do a 1/4 inch on this side as well. So I didn't have wasn't fused, my interfacing. So that's what I was doing. And it is pretty hot. Okay, 1/4 inch. All right. So now that that's done, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half and I'm going to match those ends. So I will fold it right sides together. So you'll see what I mean. So I'm just going to bring you in a little bit just so that you guys can see what's actually happening here. Or at least I'll try to bring you in so you can see what's happening. 1 second. So these are my folded lines, my folded edges. I'm going to fold them right sides together like this, and I'm going to align those folded edges just like that. And you'll see why I do this. I'm going to create a tube with this. So those will be together and I'm just clipping them in place. Just like that. Then once I've done that, I'm going to sew along the bottom here where the edges meet at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm then going to reach my hand inside and turn my tube right side out. But these edges will be finished. And when I do the pocket, just so that you can see what the pocket looks like, when I stitch it down, I will be stitching along that folded edge. But it just looks nice and clean when you do it this way. So let me show you what the pocket looks like. All right. So because I folded this edge here, it looks nice and clean and crisp. Sometimes when you do it and you just, sew it around, you don't always get that as neat as you'd like it. So by folding it under first, that makes it nice and clean. And when we attach it, we will be putting these two pieces together and sewing it closed. So you don't have to worry about that. So let's sew this at 1/4 of an inch with a stitch length of between 3 and 3.5. I will be back tacking at the beginning and the end. Okay. Now, let's turn this right side out. And I kept this folded. I'm just going to turn this right side out, just like this. So I'm just sticking my hand in there and pulling it out. Okay, and that will be my pocket. But you'll see how the edges are nice and clean. I'm going to, this is the seam at the bottom. I'm just going to clip this along the sides, matching up those folded edges. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. It doesn't have to be about this. It just has to be about bag making. So if you have a bag making question, feel free to ask. I don't know how to put in a sleeve, so I can't help you there. But I guess you can ask because there are garment makers on here as well and, listening in. So somebody may be able to help you with that. All right. I'm going to flatten this. You can definitely come back and iron this if you want to. I'm not going to. I know it seems like I like ironing, but I don't. All right. And then what I'm going to do is at the top here, this is the folded edge, not the edge that I sewed. I'm going to put 1/8 of an inch seam. And the reason I do that is because we're not going to sew this later on. We're only going to be sewing the sides and the bottom. So there will be no stitches here. And I want to make sure that these pieces stay together. So I'm going to go back and sew at 1/8 of an inch. Once again, if you're new to this, you can absolutely do 1/4 of an inch on this step. Make sure your folded edges are folded under. I'm going to use this top stitch length, so I'm going to turn it to between a 4 and a 4.5 here. And I'm going to back tack. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put some lines on this because we're going to need to do some folding. So the same way that we did folding on our other piece, when we did our pocket, we had to do folding to do some pleats. We're going to do the same thing on this as well. We want to make sure that we have a 3-dimensional look. So what's happening is in here, I don't know if you can see that. See how it has that? Here is flat, but here there's like a 3-dimensional look. So I want to make sure I have that on there as well. My pocket will be a little bit smaller. I think I did it wrong, but that's okay. So you're going to come in here and you're going to measure. I'm going to measure the center, and I'm going to draw a center line for myself on here with my Choco liner or, removable pen. So I know where the center is on this, but I'm just going to draw it on here anyway. We will be using the center line to stitch it to our lining. So that's going to be my center line. And then I'm going to measure in from the edge, and I will add another line. So I'm just going to, and mine will be a little bit smaller than yours. I think I cut it wrong, but this is what you should be doing. So you're going to add those additional lines as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold like we did on the exterior. We're going to fold. Mine will be really weird. So where the second line is, you're going to fold that. You're going to clip it in place. So this is the line on either side of your center line. And just like this, you're going to go to the other side on either side of your center line, and you're going to fold it in half again, or fold it down just like that, and clip. And we are going to sew on that center line, which is how we're going to lock it down. So then what happens is when we sew our pocket in, I'm going to sew my center line. These two will meet in the middle. I have clips there, but they'll meet just like that in the middle. And that's how I did this one. So yours should be wider than mine, but that's how I did this. So I'm going to put the little pleat by stitching it here. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to sew down the center line to lock it in. And once that line is in place, I can then come back and sew all the way around this way, keeping these two pieces folded. So let's do the little pleats first. So the pleats are going to be at 1/8 of an inch. And I sew them on the top. So I sew them over here and over here. So on the top, I don't lay my material down here and sew on the side with the center line. And that's because most of the time on your sewing machine, the pretty stitches come out of the top of your needle and not the bottom. Okay, so let's go. A stitch length for this is going to be the same. So I'm going to use that stitch length of between a 4 and a 4.5. I will back tack at the beginning and the end. Take your time. There is some thickness here, so take your time. That's one side done. Once again, I'm going to do the other side. Great. Okay. And then let's go back and see how that looks. So that's how it looks. So when I'm done, I'm going to fold these in to meet the center line there. And I'm going to fold this pleated in to the center line. So then your pocket, once you look at it, and I'm going to stick a clip in it just so you can see, your pocket will be flat again. So by folding it in, it makes your pocket flat. So I'll fold this in. Just like that. And you can see it's flat again. So it's totally flat. So when we stitch it for the final time, we're going to make sure all the folds are under here and here. We're going to stitch it down and around with it flat like this. Before we do that, however, we're going to need to put it on our lining and centered. So grab your lining. So this is your lining. I'm going to do a couple of snips on this. So I'm going to snip the top and the bottom. So I'm just folding it in half and giving it a good snip for the center. You can mark it once again with a marking tool. So that's the top. And then I'm also going to mark the sides. And we're going to mark the sides because we're going to need to lay our decovil heavy in there. as well as align our side pieces. So I'm folding it in half. So I'm marking top, bottom, and both sides, the center, by folding it in half. There are measurements in your pattern for the placement of this. I'm just aligning my center, which is hard to see here. So use the measurements in your pattern to see where exactly you should be placing this. I'm just going to roughly place it for myself on here. I will be clipping this in place, clipping this together. I use paper tape in the pattern. You can use pins if you have them. Make sure when you lay this on here, you have the part of your pocket that you top stitch to the top, right? So you don't want to stitch it in there upside down. So this had the top stitching. You want that on the top. You're going to align it with the centers. So you're going to put this in here according to directions. Make sure, just like you did for the other one, you measure both sides to make sure that they're equidistant one from the other. So I'm going to use pins because I don't want to go and be fiddling at the sewing machine with you guys. Most part, I don't use pins because I stick myself. I don't know why, but I don't know how to move my fingers out of the way. All right. So now once you've done that, everything should be flat. When you're done and everything's in here, it should be totally flat. By pushing this in the middle, it should be flat. If it's not flat, then you need to readjust it. Once again, measure in from both sides over here to make sure that it's equally distant. I marked my center, so I'm eyeballing it on camera, but the measurements are in the pattern. We're going to come back in and we're going to sew this. We're going to start at the top, sew down the edge along the bottom. Make sure to keep this folded at the bottom here, all the way across, pivot, and go back to the top. You're going to back tack at the top and the bottom. Before we do that, what I want to do is I want to stitch this down the center. So I have my center line. We're going to stitch that in place down the center, and then we'll do this piece here. So let's stitch it down in the center, and then we'll stitch that. So I'll explain it when we get to the sewing machine. Stitch length is a 3 or a 3.5. I'm going to start with the center. So I'm just going to lay it real flat. You should pin it in such a way that it is flat and you don't have to worry about it. I can see my line, and I'm just going to stitch right down there and back tack at the top and the bottom. It naturally wants to lie there anyway, so it's not really much you can do. Once you've done that, then you can make sure that this is flat. So these two pieces should meet just like that. So when I come to it, I'm going to make sure they're flat. I'm going to start at my corner, tuck under that fold, make sure it meets the other one. If it's a little bit over, that's okay. That's probably even better because you'll make sure that that bottom one is not peeking out. We're going to stitch starting at the corner and back tack. I am stitching at 1/8 of an inch. Make sure to fold this down right here where they meet. Make sure that they're folded down and they're meeting right here. I'm going to sew across. I will take a couple of stitches back just to make sure that they stay down and then continue on. Fold your piece under at the ends over here to make sure they're nicely folded, and then stitch. Back tack at the top. And let's go back. Let's take a look and see how this looks now. I am going to take out my pins. You didn't stitch along the top, but now you can see how you have those little pockets. Yours will be wider than mine, but that's what it should look like. The construction is exactly the same. Okay, so now that we've done the pocket and we're complete with that, you would give it a, you can give it a nice little iron if you'd like. And we're going to now go in, and before we start anything else, I'm going to fuse my decovil heavy to the bottom center of my bag. So what I did is I did mark the centers over here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere my decovil heavy, which is this piece here. I folded this in half lengthwise, and I marked the center already for this. So I've already snipped the center. I'm going to grab my ironing board. And I'm going to fuse it on there. Now, decovil heavy is one of those things that once it's fused, you should let it cool for about 30 minutes, I believe is what the directions say. I'm not going to do that tonight, but that's what you should do, and that's so it doesn't lift. I do give it steam. So you're going to align the center here with your center notch. And this was actually done on page like 3 or 4 at the beginning, but I saved it for it to be done here because it didn't kind of make sense to me in the live demo to do that. But it was part of the prep. So it should go all the way to the end. There's a gap here, which we're going to use to stitch. And so we cut it out of the seam allowance. And I'm just giving it some steam and letting it sit. So what I'm doing is I'm installing this. But what I was saying is if you have your zipper and you like your zipper to open, I like it to open this way. And I tend to put the heavier part, so I put the pocket near my body. So if I turn it this way and I have my bag, I will pull the zipper open. I don't know why crossbody. If you don't like your zipper opening that way, you can take this out, turn the zipper around this way, and install it that way so that it's just opening, not crossbody, not crossways to you. So it's up to you how you want to do it. I'm going to install it this way. I'm lining up the little center marks. This is actually one of the things I like about making my own bags is that I can do this little modification for myself. I know sometimes people who are left-handed are adapting to people who are right-handed because a lot of the bags are made for right-handed people. So the ones that are sold commercially, they're not handmade. All right. So I'm going to baste this in using the longest stitch on my sewing machine. You can use a double-sided tape if you want, but I'm just going to baste this in with these clips. So let's go to the sewing machine. I'm using a stitch length. Longest for me is a 6 on my sewing machine. I would say use a stitch length that you don't mind ripping out. So if it's really teeny and you have to rip it out, it can be a pain. I am using 1/8 of an inch. Okay. I now need to grab my accent piece, and that was the top accent pieces. So this was the exterior pieces. So that was these 2 pieces, and I need to grab those. I am going to mark the center of this as well by folding it in half, and I'll do that to both. And I'll mark top and bottom. The top will help me when I install it in the bag. And because I do need to install this into the bag, I want to make sure that I also have that folded edge that I did for the exterior of the bag. So I'm going to do that on this as well. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So when we constructed this bag, the exterior, we actually creased this down and we folded it. I want to do the same on this. So I'm going to do it on both of my pieces. It was a 1/2 inch fold, so I'm going to measure down on my top pieces as well and iron it in place. And the directions are in the measurements are in the instructions. And I'm going to do a quick iron of this. Like I said, when you do these, it makes lining up things so much easier. And when you put things together, it makes it so much easier. So I know it seems like it's a lot of, so I'm going to fold this to that drawn line and I'm going to iron. Just like that. Okay. So now that I've done that, I can then add it to the top of my lining. So I grab my lining. I take one of my tops, fold it down so that the exterior fabric is up. I've marked the center. So I'm going to align the center with the center. And the reason I do this also is because sometimes I will cut it a little bit long. So I just I get in the habit of marking the center for everything. I'm going to clip this. I will be going to the sewing machine and I will be stitching this in at a 1/4 inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3 and 3.5. Make sure to turn your stitch length down because we were just doing a basting stitch. And I am starting at the very edge here of my long edge of my lining. Okay, so that's one side in. So push that up just like that. So you can see this is both the exterior fabric and here goes my fold that I'm going to use when I line my bag up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bottom and I'm going to do the same thing. So we're going to put the sides on when we are done. So I'm lining up my center again here. I will go back and baste it just like I did for the other side. So this is the other side of the zipper. I'm going to baste that in, longest stitch length or whatever stitch you're comfortable with, at 1/8 inch. And now we're going to put the top piece on. So let's get that piece on. For the other side, for this side here, we're going to add that top piece on. Make sure that it's right sides together, centered right here. Clip it in place. It's sort of the same thing, right? And we're going to sew that at 1/4 inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3.5. Just be consistent, whatever you're using, just be consistent. All right, and now we have both of those in. We're going to open our zipper. We're going to go to our sewing machine, and I am going to top stitch this totally flat. I top stitch on the top piece. On this piece, I'm going to use 1/8 inch, and I'm top stitching away 1/8 inch from that seam, and I'm going to do it on this side, and I'm going to do it on the other side. Remember I said that on day 2, you want to keep it in the direction that it naturally falls. It just makes it easier. So let's go back and top stitches, and then we'll clip on the sides. Top stitching, once again, is 1/8 inch seam allowance. Normally what you would do is when I installed the first half of the zipper, I would have done it, and then I do the second half. It's just, if you do it when it's totally flat, it's easier, but I skipped that step. So I'm going to do a stitch length between a 4 and a 4.5, and I'm going to top stitch. And the reason that we top stitch is to keep that seam down and make your lining not so floppy. So that's why we're top stitching this down, because we're going to catch that seam in our stitch line. So let me show you what I mean. I top stitched along this top piece right here. And what it does is it locks this in so it doesn't come forward, and it stops it from being floppy. So now what I can do is I can put on my sides. So everything is now stitched together except for the sides. So we have everything in there and it's stitched together. Now what you're going to do is you're going to grab your side pieces for your bag, and we're going to add them to this. The way that we're going to do that is I'm going to take my zipper, just because I don't want it in there, and I'm just going to put a clip here so it can keep it out of the way as I'm doing this. I do close my zipper in order to add the pieces in. On this piece, you want to also make sure that you draw your line here, fold it down. So I won't go back to the iron for this. I'll just draw the line and I'll finger press it, but you should iron it on the side piece as well. So all of these should be, all the top should be folded. So it just makes it so much easier, like I keep saying. And I'm just going to finger press this right down, just like that. I'm then going to fold this in half lengthwise, and I'm going to mark the center on the top and the bottom. The center on the top is so that when I drop in the other piece, I can align the center of the sides. So that's why I clip the top. And then I'm going to mark the bottom so that I can make sure when I put it into the bag, it's totally centered top to bottom with the bottom. Because remember, that lining piece was one piece. It wasn't several pieces. It was one piece. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take our bag, and it doesn't really matter which side you start on. You just want to start where the decovil is, and I'm starting at the bottom here. I'm going to make sure this is facing in So I will have my lining facing out, so it's really right sides together. I'm starting at the bottom center, and I'm going to place a clip. I'm then going to put another clip on either side of this. And I will be sewing this from the inside. If you're sewing it from the outside, make sure your clips, the flat part of your clip is down. I'm sewing it from the inside, so that's why the flat side is pointing out. Once you've done the bottom, align the top pieces. And it just makes it easier if you do that, to clip then around the side and evenly distribute things. So I'm going to do that. And what I'll do is I'll do both sides. I'll do both side pieces. So when I go to the sewing machine, I'm doing them both at once. Once we're done with this, we're going to drop this into our bag. And we're going to do what's known as a drop-in lining. So all I'm doing is clipping this all the way around. If you have to, you can put tiny snips over here. So you can put little tiny cuts, no more than 1/8 of an inch. It's also something you can do. But you can take little tiny snips about 1/8 of an inch. And that helps the fabric to relax. So it allows it to spread. And then you can clip the corners. I didn't have any problems, but if you're having problems on your lining, put little snips about 1/8 of an inch around that curve, and it'll help you to spread and pull the fabric so you can help it lay better. So that's just another little tip. I'm just going to lay this flat and continue to clip. I will do both ends. And I promise you we're almost done. So we're going to drop this in when we're done, when we finish sewing this, and then we're going to attach our handle. Now I purposely leave the handle till the end so that it's not in the way of anything that we're doing. So it's not in the way of us putting the bag together. It's kind of like an afterthought. One thing I will say to you is that use a complementing thread so that you don't see the stitches, because I am stitching through all the layers. So I use a medium gray thread, so it's hardly noticeable. And if you have a rivet machine, you can always, after you stitch it in, you can always then add a couple of rivets to your handle as well. You know, decoration, or if you want extra stability. I can do a video just on the sound of clips, grabbing clips, what that sounds like. Okay, and done. So I'm going to stitch this at 1/4 of an inch, going all the way around with a stitch length of 3 or 3.5. I've done both sides, so when I go to the sewing machine, I will likewise stitch both sides. I am stitching, like I mentioned, from the inside. So you can stitch it turning it up like this and stitching from the outside. I just like stitching from the inside. So it's just a personal preference. Okay. I'm going to back tack at the top here. And when I get back to the top, I'll back tack again. And I'm going to grab my awl just to hold my fabric together, especially around this curve. It is stiff because of that decovil heavy, so just be aware of that. There is a stiffness to it, but you should be able to, fold it down, beat it into submission. Also, don't worry too much about the creasing. If you have any creasing that's occurring around this corner, it usually straightens itself out, and nobody's that deep in your bag to see that you have that crease in that corner. So just, breathe and just work with it. Like I said, if you take those little snips, it does help it to lie flatter around the corners. So, and I'm just taking my time to make sure. Okay. So that's one side done, and I'm just quickly checking it to make sure I got everything. And then I'll come back and do the other side. Okay. So now let's do the other side. Fold this down. So if you need to ever manipulate this and you want to lift your presser foot, what I would remind you to do is make sure the needle is still in the down position when you do that, because you don't want it to be misaligned. Okay, and I'm just gonna very quickly go back to this other side. I forgot to back tack, so that's all I'm doing. Forgot to back tack at the beginning. So let's go back to the cutting mat. Now you can open your zipper and just stick your hand in there and run it along your seam. And you can actually look at it to make sure it's not just the bottom of your bag. You can check the sides of your bag too, because there are times that I've not caught the side seams either. All right, so you want to make sure that everything is in place and intact. So now that I have the lining done, grab your exterior piece that we did on day 2. You're going to take your lining. I'm going to make sure the pocket is to the back, and I'm just going to drop it in here, just like that. So I'm just dropping it in. Let me just back out a little bit here so you guys can get a better view of what I'm doing. And I'm just going to drop this in. You're going to see how nice it is now that I folded those edges. With my corner seams over here, what I do is I start on the side when I'm clipping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take over here where it's in the center, and I'm going to align it with the other side, which is in the center. Fold this over your foam. So the exterior fabric should be folded over it, not behind it. Okay? Fold it over it. And then you're going to clip it in place, just like that. At the corners here, I nest them, which means I take one seam and I push it to the left, and I take the other seam and I push it to the right. So when I fold this down, I make sure that the seams are pointing in opposite direction. So I nest my seams and then I align them on top of each other and I add a clip. So like I said, I work at the sides all the first and then I work my way around. Once again, because we have done that folding and ironing at the beginning, it should make this process so much easier. So I did one end and then I'll do the other side as well. And then I'll come back and do the back and the front. Add as many clips as you need. So this is the part where you probably use a whole dish full of clips, but add as many as you need to hold it together. All right, so that's one side. So I've done both of my sides and now I'm going to pull this just like that, just tug it. I put my fingers between them and tug it. And then I'm going to match up the center and then I'm going to work my way out. So I match up the center, then I kind of cut it in half again and I put another one at the center. And then I do the same on this side. Make sure that you're folding over your foam. Now, when I sew this together, I'm actually going to, my machine is a single stitch machine and I don't have a free arm. So I'm going to turn my bag totally inside out because I like sewing my bag from this side, but it's easier if I turn this inside out on my machine. If you have a free arm, you don't have that, you shouldn't have that concern, but I don't. It's a totally flatbed machine, so. The other thing you can do on this is if you want to get it to align even better, is take a piece of double-sided tape and I run it along one side of this and then I clip it together and it actually helps to hold it. Again, it helps it to hold it very well while you're working with it. So I have done that as well. And sometimes I've even used it and never used clips. It made my life so much easier. So that's something else you can do. But, you know, it's material, it's considered waste. And so some people would just prefer to clip it and then sew it. So everything should align here, right? You should have a straight end. Everything should align. Give your fabric. I normally pull out the sides just to make sure I give it all the stretch I can and make it as smooth as I can. So everything is clipped together now. If you look at your bag, I'm just going to close it. The clips are in there, but you can see it's almost done, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to put a row of stitches. I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch all the way around. You can use a quarter of an inch seam allowance all the way around. I sometimes put 2 stitches around top stitching. So I'll put a quarter of an inch first. So I always do the quarter of an inch first and then I do the 1/8 of an inch. I don't do the 1/8 of an inch because it tends to shift at the top. So I'll do a quarter of an inch first and then I'll come back with an 1/8 of an inch if you're going to do 2 rows of stitching. I normally start at the side also. So if later on you're planning to put hinges in or something like that, the side is less obvious. I'm really reckless, so I actually start in a seam in the back so that when I come back around, I end in that seam. That is bulky, so I don't, if you're doing this for the first time, I don't recommend that. Just start at the side, or even better, start at the back, because nobody really sees the back because you're normally flipping it and then everything looks clean. So wherever you're happiest starting, that's where you're going to start. I'm going to turn my bag like I said inside out because it works better for my sewing machine to do that. If your sewing machine, you have a free arm, please use your free arm. Now, by doing this, I don't necessarily have to turn, believe it or not, the whole bag out. I just need to get that top out enough that I can sew it, which is really nice. I'm just going to turn this all the way out like that. So I just need to get it enough out that I can sew around my bag. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine. It is a top stitch, so use between a 4 and a 4.5 stitch length. I do find if you do have a straight stitch machine, I do find stitching it this way, meaning turning it inside out, always try to stitch from the front. So even if you're not turning it inside out, always try to stitch from the exterior. I find that if you try to stitch from the lining side, your top stitching never looks as pretty. So always try to stitch from the exterior side. And even if you don't turn it inside out, you know, because you don't do that, do make sure it's easier when it's right side out to come in here and say, oh, I'm gonna sew on the wrong side. But when you look at the right side, it doesn't look as pretty. Something always shifts. So that's just my advice and my experience. So give that a try if you're finding that it's not coming out as pretty. So let's go back to the sewing machine. I am going to start, like I said, you can start in the back of your bag where it's less noticeable. I'm going to start at a seam. I'm hoping I don't, well, I have to start at the back because I'll tell you why, the camera's here and I don't want to knock it about as I'm sewing. So let me just start from the back. I am sewing on the right side of my fabric. I am doing 1/8 of an inch. If you're doing, you can do 1/4 of an inch. Once again, if you're doing 2 rows of stitching, please do the 1/4 of an inch first and then come back and do the 1/8 of an inch. It'll just look better. I promise you. Changing my stitch length and we're going to sew. Another bit of advice is if you're sewing, this is circular. So don't try to sew a curve, try to sew a straight line. So what do I mean by that? Instead of looking at it as a curve, as you're sewing, pull your fabric around so it creates a straight line from your needle. So that's just another little tip. So I sew as much as I can, and then what I do is I pull my fabric around so that my fabric is straight. So I need my fabric to be totally straight going into the under the needle. And you'll find that your lines become straighter that way also. So these are the fiddly bits. Okay. Almost all the way back around. I slipped out a little bit. Okay. And okay, so now we're done with that. Okay. Let's go back to our cutting mat. That's definitely a lot easier without a camera sitting there. All I'm doing is turning it right side out. That's all I'm doing with the bag. The last step is going to be to put the handle on and then make sure that we give it a good press. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So that's what it looks like. I'm just going to push it down in there, my lining, pushing my lining down in there really well. And then what I do is I actually stick my hand in here and I pop to either side to help it straighten out. And that's your bag. So then that's really your bag. This is your flap, so I don't have the clips in there anymore. That should close. And that's what it looks like. The last part, the last magical part, where the magic happens, is to put this on. So I left that to the end, as you can see, because it would get in the way with everything that we're doing. You're going to lay it flat, just like this. And what should happen is those folded edges should end up along the folded edge. It should stay against this straight edge here and the straight edge here. So when you pull it in, it's going to sit up like that. So there are measurements in the directions on how to do this. All right. And what I will say to you, because I had somebody write me and they used a walking foot. I do not advise a walking foot for this part of it, because you need to get as close as you can to the tubing that's in here. A walking foot is going to leave you too far. I'm on page 38. Is I use double-sided tape to help hold it down. You can also use pins, but I found that the double-sided tape helped me to hold it down. Even with pins, you know, because eventually you're going to take the pins out anyway. So I just put a piece. You can put a couple of pieces in here. And I was mentioning, look at the directions. I do not recommend using a walking foot, right? Because you need to get close. If you use a walking foot and you're too far and you have rivets, feel free to add a rivet right here and a couple along here if you want to make it decorative, because you need that strap, that handle to sit right up just like that. I use my regular foot, so I used the foot that came on my sewing machine when I did this. So I did not have any issues with it. And if you do that, then it should be totally fine. I will be stitching through all the layers. So I'm going to be stitching through the entire flap piece. I did put some double-sided tape. Once again, look at the measurements in the instructions and it'll tell you where the placement of this should be. I'm going to eyeball it so to get it centered. That's what I mean. So you're going to take this, you're going to align this with your edge, just like that. and I'm pressing down. If you want to, like I said, you can use pins. I used paper tape when I did it, so I did this. And I just taped across it here, just like that. Now, the first half is going to be a lot easier than the second half, because the first half, you can actually push the tubing out of the way. When you do the second half, what you will need to do is push the tubing flat. So you'll need to flatten the tubing so that you can get as close as you can over here. All right, so that's what I'm going to say. So let's do one side, and then I'll come back and do the other side. You will measure in and place a mark in the directions it tells you where. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm just going to eyeball it for the video. And then I'll come back and rip it out later, of course, but because it'll be totally wrong. But I'm just going to put a mark right here with my chalk liner, just so I know where it is. And I'll do the same on the other side, just so that I know where it is. So I'll do one side first, and then I'll come back. You can use pins. I used paper tape because it was stitched in already on one side, and then I came back and I used paper tape again. So I'm just going to eyeball this right here. And I'll show you what I mean about the foot. Okay. So this you can lay flat. You can get close to one side over here. On this side, you can get close to it, and you can always slide the tube. It's when you come to the other side that you will have to do a little bit of manipulation to get it out of the way. You can absolutely, if you want to, use rivets if you have a rivet, tool to do so. So all I do is I stitch along this edge of the strap, along the chalk line, and back down, and then back across here. So I'm doing a row of stitches. Once again, I am stitching through all the layers. So all I did was I pivoted. So I started here. I went down about halfway. I went down across, down here, up and around. And then I used paper tape so you could just pull it out of the way. So you'll get to see me do it again because I have to do the other side. Okay. So the other side will be a little bit more tricky because I can't move the tubing. So I'm going to make sure I slide the tubing all the way in there because it should sit right up when you're done, right? So this tubing has to be right against that. And I'm just pushing it, squeezing it in there, and it's right down here. Once again, you can use pins. You're going to use your measurements, and you're going to add. You're going to put this in place just like that. And it sits right up. So I'm not even holding it. It sits right up. But you want to make sure you get really close to that tubing so that it will sit up. I'm going to add a couple of pins. I added double-sided tape in the directions. So if you have that, please use it. It will help to keep it in place. I'm just going, in the interest of time, I can take them out once I'm done. I just want to hold it down temporarily. And you're going to get as close as you can. I do not recommend a walking foot for this. It's not really that thick, so you shouldn't need one. But I don't recommend it because you need to get close to that tubing. If you don't, it will flop over. You can use a zipper foot if you'd like. But like I said, I use my standard one, my standard foot. So I'm going to come back in and do the same thing. I'm going to start as close as I can to this tubing right here. If you want, you can bend the tube out of the way and just run straight across there because it'll pop back up. So that's how you get close. And then you can come down and go around. So let's do that. So I'm going to start where the tubing is. I have all these clips here now. I'm going to bend the tubing down, right? Because I want to get as close as I can to that right there. You can bend it down. It's hard for you to tell you, but it's actually like right, like 1/8 of an inch away. I'm almost like resting on it. And then I'm going to lower my presser foot and I'm going to stitch across. If you want, you can put rivets in it to get it even closer later on if you have a rivet press. So now it's in there. I'm going to lift this. I'm going to crumple up my bag I'm going to rotate it into my throat plate. Yes, the tubing is there, but you can still rotate it. There we go. And then I'm going to lower my presser foot. I can take these pins out and I can come back down. Hold the tubing down. It'll make it easier. One more time. Okay. I'm going to lift and rotate. And you can't see it, but it's already, my handle is already sitting up. I didn't even do anything really that special. I don't know if you can see it, I'm pressing the tubing down, right? So you want to make sure you press it down so it's out of the way. And my tube is like almost 1/8 of an inch away, I promise you. I'm going to rotate this, press this down again, get it as flat as you can, and then come back to the middle. Oh, my bag is getting caught. And I will back tack. Okay. Now I'll show you, I didn't do anything special to this except to get as close as I can. Once again, if you can't get that close, you can always come back in later on and use rivets to do it. But that's my handle. I didn't do anything. It's not flopping over and it is sitting up. If you don't get close in there, it will flop. So now if you turn it around, close it, ignore the placement. I just did it, eyeballed it. Yours should come out in the right place. Yours should come out up here, but ignore the placement of it. But that's how you install it. I just wanted to show you how to do it. But you see it sitting right up, which is really, really funny. So thank you guys so much for hanging in there with me. I promise you when you're done, your handle will be in the right place. I did not measure mine, and so therefore it is in the front of my bag. It would probably be interesting to just add one to the back of the flap and then just make it like 2 handles because it's in the perfect placement for that. But in any event, this is the last night that we have. I will be later on today. I was going to do it earlier today, but later on today, I will be posting any extra kits that I have. I really don't have too many left. And when I say don't have too many, it's less than 5. So please make sure if you're interested in the kit that you purchase it. Once the kit sells out, I will not have any more because I do not have the fabric. Ordered enough fabric for the kits with a little bit extra. I don't have extra. This is what it should look like. Once again, it should be closed. Walking foot, not going to help you in this case, but this is what it should look like. But this is what it should look like once you get your measurements in there. I consider it an intermediate pattern because you are using that handle and also because you're cutting into your material to put in the lock. So I consider it intermediate pattern. I will say to you, however, it is domestic sewing machine friendly. So if you want something that's a challenge, it's something that you can give a try. You will learn quite a few techniques in this bag. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at sewyourbag. I do have a website, sewyourbag.com. If anybody is interested in fabric, hardware, interfacing, the kits that I have left over are all there. And please don't forget to subscribe. Not every video is like this. I do not pre-record too many videos because I want people to be able to ask questions if they have questions about bag making. So over the course of the last 3 days, I have thoroughly enjoyed having you guys join me. Have a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and please enjoy making bags. Have a good night.